Testing, testing. Boy, do we have a good podcast today. Number 4. And what are we talking about? We are talking about Mr. Bill Gates and his flip-flop strategy for the day. I don't know what he's going to be saying in the future, but I do know what he's saying now. And I sure as hell remember what he used to say a decade or even 2 decades ago. It's really important that we do this now. So think of this as an emergency podcast. Those guys or those people or those fans on my group that used to attack me about the fact that my climate strategy was so very different from the single slogan, which was first was global warming. Then when the temperatures didn't really rise in certain places but rose in other places like in the Arctics, they forget or they cherry pick some of the information. And then they had to change the slogan to global warming. Sorry, climate change. They had to change it to climate change because global warming was no longer functioning. But if you go back 5 decades, it was global freezing. So what is it? All right, so I'm not going to attack the fact that climate change is real. And I've said that from the beginning. It's a natural process for the climate of the planet to change. It has been from the beginning. If you look at the core samples, and there's plenty of peer-reviewed science on this topic, you will see that the Earth has gone through many different cycles whereby the composition of the atmosphere has changed, whereby temperature of the Earth has changed, and that we are in a cycle, and humans do contribute or exacerbate to a certain degree, and that certain degree is not set in stone by any means. But my strategy was to specifically focus on microclimates where we could reduce the impact of human of the human side, of the human impact side. And there's stacks of science that was compiled for the Generation Now movement. But I was ostracized because the Generation Now movement was very radical in the sense that what the science actually proved and the science that was used was going to be very effective, but it was on a community basis. It was on a groundswell basis. And people could directly take control of their environment. You see, when cities or when towns or communities develop, it's a natural process for them to start chopping down the trees, making space, around villages. Think about villages in Africa or in South America or so, where new communities are coming out of nowhere. It's people joining up together, farming communities, etc. And they start taking away the trees. They start chopping away the trees. And what happens when you start taking away the trees? You start taking away part of one of the elements that is extremely functional or relevant for the microclimate. This is why you see changes in the Amazonian rainforest and the levels of water in the river. It's because of deforestation. And yes, there's a lot of things that we should fight, and there's a lot of things that we should that we should combat to stop these things. But they are on a very specific basis. They are on a very tailor-made solution basis, where you need to take an area, you need to look at what the consequences are of the human human involvement or cause, and then address it for that specific region. I'm talking about deforestation here, but this is very actually like I said, it's a complex topic that was trying to be nailed down to something like just climate change. And it wasn't fair and it wasn't right. And number 2 of my point was the fact that climate change was being blamed on everything. So white sharks are no longer on the coast in South Africa for a period. Climate change, the temperature of the water has changed, so therefore the white sharks aren't here anymore. And then a report comes out that a Chinese syndicate has been long-lining sharks and taking them out by the hundreds out of the water for shark fins. And just dumping the carcasses back into the water, but it was a syndicate that was causing the problem, the reduction in the species. But climate change was the cause. Let's all get on board. Who does that? Everybody takes the same slogan and just repeats it. So all of these dumb personalities, these brainless hacks, takes the slogan and just passes it on every single speech they do, because they do none of their own research. They don't dig into it. They have nothing to do with the front line. They haven't spent 5 minutes in the front line if it wasn't with a set of press cameras and in a controlled situation and sleeping in a 5-star hotel. You can see me getting worked up about these people because I've seen them in action. You talk about the UN. Well, how many times did I knock on the UN's door asking for a helicopter ride to get a chimpanzee out of a war-torn zone? Oh, many times. And what did they say? No, this is not our mandate. No, you're going to have to save this animal somehow, or some other way. Yeah, no, we're only here to observe and take our $22,000 a month salary for sitting here in this camp, typing up a report. What are you doing here? Rescuing a couple of chimps? Why is that important? So you can see I've got some feelings towards the UN as well. But let me not get too worked up. We're here to talk about, in honor of Mr. Bill Gates, we are talking about his flip-flop for the day, and how careful we need to be in listening to the message that comes with a single slogan of climate change. We need to investigate ourselves. There's nothing more gratifying than taking and drawing on scientific papers coming from real scientists from the front lines that are questioning things, but are doing science and their reports are peer-reviewed. How many of you know that the IPCC report is different from the summary that is written by the non-elected bureaucrats that write the summary page of the IPCC report? How many of you know that? How many of the critics that keep on nailing me have actually read the whole IPCC reports? Yeah, it's funny how these things come out in the end. So Mr. Bill Gates is trying to reframe this to say, okay, so 2 degrees might not make that goal. The oceans are going to rise. It's going to get hotter. It's maybe not going to make the 1.5, not even the 2-degree goal. But that's not going to be so bad anymore, right? No, we did say that the Great Barrier Reef is being bleached because of the temperature change. But then, let's cherry pick that. Maybe not mention that the reef's growing in other places. No. You know what we should do? We should say that it's not actually so bad. We should actually take that extra money that we were going to spend on putting mirrors in space to block the sunlight to come to the Earth. We should, if I can't sell that project, maybe I can sell vaccines, because that's what he's doing in this video. Maybe we should give everyone an extra polio vaccine that's made by my company. Gavi, the company that Mr. Bill Gates owns. And then he went to WEF to explain how profitable this new venture of his is and what the return on investment is. Mr. Bill Gates that made the local vaccine distribution and manufacture deal here with the South African government, the corrupt South African government, for the COVID vaccine that we so all desperately need. Yes, the 0.1% of us that were affected by it in a negative way. And we had to send our kids to school. And the loss of how those kids were taken back in their development because they needed to see communication, to see people's lips moving. How they were affected by having to wear masks that Dr. Fauci himself said was ineffective, and then flip-flopped You know, everyone just ate it up. Just flip flop. I'll get away with it. Don't worry. I'll take a $1 million prize from someone. That's another way they launder money. So I'll give you a prize for the hard work that you've done, and then I will say you get an award, but the award comes with $1 million because you played the game, Mr. Fauci. Oh, well done, Mr. Bill Gates. What is he going to get now? Is he getting a new vaccine deal? Is he going to do some new distribution for some new virus that's coming out? I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is just too good to not talk about. Really, it's just too juicy to talk about, because these people were selling you. They were selling you on how screwed we were. Mr. Al Gore, do you know what his investment package, his investment portfolio is all about? Mr. Al Gore's investment portfolio is all in green energy solar panels and selling these big green energy projects. Yet his compound uses more energy than 20 families would. I can't remember the exact number, but his compound uses more energy, not green energy. It used to be normal energy. Yeah, and flies his private jet. Everyone else flies as their private jets. The single biggest contributor to CO2 from a device comes from a private jet. But they are so important that rules for thee but not for me. That's how it happens. That's how we all get fooled, is we just gotta go along with the narrative. I'm here to tell you, you don't need to go along with shit. You don't need to go along with whatever these frogs have to say. Mr. Bill Gates' opinion is as worth as much as his fake meat manufacturing facility that has gone bust. Well, it's pretty much gone bust. I mean, the shares are worthless right now. Yeah. So let me just go into a small amount of detail, and you guys can go back in the articles on this Facebook page, because it's existed for 15 years, and you can read about what I explained was so important about our message. It's the fact that we as communities can make a difference. We can reduce CO2 emissions because it's important. That's what the whole concept was about. The life that exists right now, animals and human beings, we are used to a certain atmospheric composition. So if we are living in environments where there's more CO2 being pumped into the air because of gasoline-powered vehicles, combustion vehicles, and those gases don't escape, and you breathe that all the time, wear a mask for a day in London in the wintertime and you'll see what those masks look like. That's not conducive to health, and it isn't for human beings or animals. That is what we can change. That is what we should change. That is how we make change. It's community on community level. We should be taking or putting in legislation or working with government to say that we shouldn't have those combustion vehicles inside the city limits, or we should have more public transportation that works off electric or green energy systems or whatever, or electric systems basically. And we could have focused on that. There is more than enough technology right now to change our environments, to do our population control, to design our city planning in such a way that we can have real change. And it's not that difficult to implement. It's not like you have to regrow half the planet and trees immediately. Ultimately, we want our CO2 filters being built. But as I mentioned in one of the previous reports about these new technologies of the soil composition that could be mixed in for farmers. These are all great initiatives that didn't exist, but now they do. And we have the ability to bring that into mass production and mass outlay and have some real impact. Don't just take what these personalities say as gospel. You gotta think about where this information is coming from. They all hang out. This is what they do. They hang out. They just circulate the same talking points, like robots. They just repeat the cycle. There's more than enough proof of that. If you take all the news channels about a certain news cycle that has to go out, and you'll see the exact words being repeated, the exact talking points being repeated by different journalists, even though those channels are far apart but under the same ownership. and under the same influence. We need to have our independence as human beings. We are not supposed to be sheeple. We are supposed to make a difference on a community level, and we can. And we will. I truly believe that we're going to be doing that. So I'm not going to be stacking up the research papers here or putting up articles in this podcast. It is pretty much one of those emergency ones where I'm talking about this topic because I already put the link up. I don't want you guys to think about this as a right-wing or a left-wing opinion. I want you guys to think about these topics as if you're normal, rational human beings, and you can see through the bull crap. You can see what is going on. And I'm telling you now, my prediction is only the first name to drop. There are more to come. They will have to change their messaging, and they are only starting now with Mr. Gates, because he can see that he can benefit from it in another area, and that's in the vaccine department. So, guys, we're living in really, really interesting times, and we have the ability to fight back. We have the ability to make change, and we do not work for these people. They are not our bosses. And the WEF and all the regulation and the plan of the 2030 plan and all that stuff, that's not enforceable on it. It doesn't have to be enforceable on us, because by the numbers we rule. It's just about converting enough people to be on the same page. Don't take my narrative as gospel. I will put enough information on this group for you to read and study. But I want you to be free-thinking human beings. Information is accessible. If you go onto university sites and research papers, there's enough means even with the help of AI, you can source enough research papers, peer-reviewed research papers, to be able to see what's going on and connect the dots. I've been doing this for 15 years, so I've had a close look at this. When somebody tells you he's a professor of something and he's a scientist and he's telling you what the truth is he a scientist in the department he's talking about? 99% of the time is not. 99% of the time is not. But they all act like they're experts. But if you start going through the topics with them, then suddenly the cookie crumbles. That's why they don't want to debate. They do not want to engage with debates about the physical facts. We've seen that several times where scientists have requested the ability to have a debate and talk about the different opinions, and most of the time they just say no because you're a climate denier. They just want to throw a label on you. Don't get shamed into an opinion. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll be back in podcast 5 with something that is broader in facts, more articles, more science to come. But I think this is a good time that we start talking about some of the real projects that the Generation Now movement was about. All right, adios. Be seeing you soon.